I don't think that it's a goal to be chased to make a warehouse dark. I think the goal which we should chase is just how can we create a much more connected warehouse? How can we connect it to the retail stores? How can we connect it to the consumer experiences? How can we ensure that the supply chain is a connected one, that I have the right inventory and stock where it needs to be?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast, The Automation Journey. I'm your host, Rebecca Call, Head of Process and Software Consulting and System Integration Management at TGW North America. And today joining me is Stipe Galic, the VP of Business Development and Marketing here at TGW. As a warehouse automation company, we're naturally in a business that's more futuristic and high-tech. So today I want to chat with you a little bit about what we think the so-called warehouse of the future looks like. Before we jump in, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, for sure. So my name is Stipe, as Rebecca said. I'm leading the front end of our organization here in North America, which incorporates marketing, business development, solution consulting. So it's all about walking the automation journey with our customers, showing up opportunities, how they can grow, how they can invest, how they can create business cases which really make sense for the business. And more than a decade ago, I started as an engineer. I was drawing layouts, I was doing calculations, I was analyzing data, I was part of the R&D organizations, worked on a lot of international projects, lived in a lot of different markets, and today I'm here.
Well, welcome. Now, we've both been in the industry for a while. We've seen different technologies. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you've seen both operations and technologies develop over the last decade or two?
I think when I think back when I started, it was all about, I remember it quite well. Our goal was how can we make a loop faster? How can we go from 2,000 load carriers to 3,000 load carriers? But it was very driven by the technology itself. And the biggest change I see today is really how connected the automation, the warehouses, the whole supply chain is to the business and to the overall experience end consumers have. So the language we are talking today to our customers is a completely different one than it used to be. And also the goal is a different one. It was about how you can get the most out of your technology and not that much about how can it create the biggest value in such a volatile world where we're in today.
So that's interesting, talking about how that shift and that connectivity in warehousing. Have you seen discussions or conversations with customers change over the last 10 years? Does that come into the conversation?
Yes, massively. I mean, I remember when I started, we really talked in detail about, what's your top of conveyor? How does the chutes of a sorter look like? How do you adapt stuff to a building? How can you fit it in? Which is today still relevant. But today, customers are coming with questions to us like, hey, can you help us increase the loyalty of our customers? Because the way how we fulfill orders, how accurate they are, how fast we can really prepare them that they can get delivered and so on, plays a role how end consumers will in the end perceive the brand or the retailer. So the connection is a much bigger one. It's not just, hey, how fast does your technology go or how many cycles you can do. It's really, can you increase the loyalty of our customers? Can you increase the satisfaction of it? And I think these are completely two different worlds.
So did that change happen all at once or did it evolve? You talked about the mechatronic components and speeding those up and making sure we had the best technology. And, well, that doesn't exactly marry with loyalty of customers. Did you see it happen all at once, or was there a critical time that made your mindset shift from mechatronic performance to actual customer overall solutions?
I mean, it somehow came slow, but then it ended up being very, very fast and transformative. I think Amazon played a big role because there was a paradigm change on expectations. Independently, if you need fast or don't need fast, there was something out there which was able to do fast, and then suddenly people started questioning, okay, why can't I get that fast? Why can't I increase the service level here? And then as people are in general curious and hungry and always want more and push the boundaries, I think there was a moment in time where the recognition was, hey, we can do much more with this stuff. And then it really become a very, very fast change. But at the same time, I think our economy in the last 5 years has gone through a lot of things which have not happened the last 30 years before, 40 years, which also has a massive impact to that. So there is an economy piece to it. There is an piece which came bottom up, enabled by technology, and people recognized, hey, there might be something, and then you put these two together, and then it ends up being somehow a super cycle which speeds all this stuff up.
So it's so interesting how much automation has changed over the last 10, 20 years. You've seen oscillations, you've seen full circles, and then you've seen this progression of automation. At the same time, you hear all of the marketing hype, all of the plug words, machine learning, AI, everything are our current plug words, but they were different 10 years ago. How do you see cutting through all the noise, all the marketing hype, and actually getting into what the warehouse of the future looks like?
I mean, I think that's quite a difficult question. I think also it's the main point of confusion which our customers might have, because there is so much out there in the market on technology, on different approaches, on needs in different industry segments. And I truly believe technology will keep evolving. There will be new technology coming in, and I think every or nearly every piece of technology has its place somewhere. But the real difference is made by the people who are able to connect all this stuff. So I think much more important than cutting edge technology is the holistic picture. How am I gonna use this technology, connect it to my customers, my end consumers, and really create the value which I need for that. So I think software is the key, obviously, to that, enabled by great technology and hardware. But it needs to be supported, and this will be the winners in this race by people who really can think holistically.
So software's, has a special place in my heart. That's where I've spent my career. But when you buy something, when you buy a goods-to-person station, when you buy a robotic arm, when you buy any technology, you have something that you see on the warehouse floor. You know that this piece of technology is going to give you X number of units in Y amount of time. Software doesn't have that necessarily tangible benefit. What are some barriers that you see in investing in those kinds of technologies? Are they cost related? Is it time to deploy? Is it risk? Something else?
I mean, risk, time, and cost always play a role. I think what I said before, the confusion piece, the noise out there in the market, because I feel a lot of people know they have to make an investment, but there is always this question in the back in the mind, is it really the right thing, or is in 1 or 2 years, is there going to be something which is even newer or better and so on. So I think it's really overcoming this single piece of investments, these islands of automation thinking, and somehow thinking in scenarios, somehow going away where I say, okay, how can I use technologies for certain ways, but at the same time keep in mind how they can collaborate or evolve in the future in that case. So it's not about buying single pieces of technology. It's not about creating islands of automation. It's in the end all about how can I lay a foundation where I can build whatever comes technology-wise, and then just keep building how the world evolves.
That's interesting. So I'm going to ask you 2 separate questions and take them any way you'd like to take them. But we talked a little bit about AI.
Yeah.
Do you see AI as having a tangible benefit in the warehouse today? Is there something that you would say, hey, this is where AI proves its value? Or do you see it still as like theoretical or marketing hype?
No, I think there is value, especially in the analytics part. So it makes stuff much faster. It allows you to see pattern which you might miss or might need much more time to really recognize. So I think that's a tangible value. And I think there are a lot of experiments going on in predictable stuff which will help you to run and operate the warehouse, or maybe even manage the operation inside and so on. But the one which I really see beneficial today is the analytics part of it.
So it's interesting when we look at data. Data is great, and most of the time the problem is not enough data. It's you have too much data, and you don't have enough time, or you don't have the right brain on the experiment to know what to do next. So we have a couple of AI-enabled features in our tech stack that allow people to see SLA improvements. So if you're in a goods-to-person station, you're at a flash pick system, and you have the station manager that can say, hey, look, you're going to meet your SLA. You could close down 2 pick stations and meet your SLA, and you're good.
Mm-hmm.
But if you as an operator know that the next day you have a lot of people on vacation, maybe you want to work ahead. So how do you see the marrying of those technologies, the AI and the data-driven analytics, with operators and how they perform their daily functions?
I mean, I think that goes also a lot in the way how the operational jobs will change in the future. Also, today there is this automation company doing these projects, and then there is the operation team trying to run this stuff. And this is something which I see merging much more in the future. So it will nearly become, or it will become, one team. The operations team will need to understand much more. And on the other side, the automation and software teams will need to able to translate their stuff in a language the operations teams really understand, and it will be a strong collaboration. So I think the future way of work in these warehouses will be much more connected than isolated like it is today.
So building on that, what throughput, accuracy, or uptime benchmarks do you see customers targeting today that would have seemed unrealistic a few years ago?
I mean, it depends in which industry segment, but I think today, whatever automation you deploy below 98 to 99% uptime, it's not acceptable. And the different ways how you can reach uptime, which results in the end, how many orders need to go out of the door. I can always over-dimension a system, have a bad uptime, and still do the job. But investment-wise, that's an issue, in that case. So I think there is a clear goal to stretch the investments in a way that they become as small as possible and as high as needed in that case, and keep this uptime high. Nevertheless, I think there is a piece of design to it, because, for example, we designed the warehouse in three different temperature zones, and when you start loading the truck, you start with the freezer aspect of it. So if you now dimension all three of these zones really on the edge to optimize costs and technically okay, because they can live with these minor reserves. But if you need to connect them all three together, and then you incorporate what's happening at the dock doors and the drivers and the trucks itself and how the truck needs to get loaded, then the reserve on the freezer needs to be potentially higher, that everything keeps flowing. So I think there's one thing about uptime, which is always be 98, 99%. But in the end, the most important thing is, can you ship your orders at the right time, in the right quantity, and what's the best possible cost you can get it? And then the availability factor, the higher you have it, the better your utilization also will be, the better your cost investment in the end will be.
All of that goes back to kind of a marriage between a customer and the technology provider. If the technology provider is selling a widget and not understanding what the daily operations of the facility are, then they're going to miss the mark. They're not going to understand that the freezer needs to be loaded first, and therefore, hey, that reserve may not be enough.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in ecosystems and collaborative approaches. I think our world is too complex, too fast, too volatile, that anybody on its own can really figure stuff in an easy way out. So I think it needs to get more connected in a private world, as in a business world, as in warehouses. And I think the only way really to run successful operation, which can really enhance the business and provide the experiences end consumers expect, will be a very collaborative one. That's also why I believe the way how retailers are purchasing automation has changed completely. It's not anymore just about get me an RFQ and I'm gonna compare some stuff, and this company is 5% cheaper than this one. And so on. There's much more to it. Obviously, price matters, but there are a lot of other elements which matter sometimes even more.
I do want to put in one plug, again, selfishly. Architecture matters. You talked about uptime. And when you're at 98, 99% uptime, if you need to deploy a system update, and maybe it's a full system update, it affects databases, it affects applications, everything, but now your tech stack is monolithic, and you have to do a full install, and then you have to do full testing, that eats into that 99% availability. And so if you do, and you're working with an archaic tech stack, then you're kind of out of luck. So modern application architecture plays a huge role in making sure that you're up, making sure that you affect the lowest number of systems possible. If you have an update that only needs to update a palletizer, then you just update the palletizer. You leave picking, you leave packing, you leave everything else alone.
Exactly. And that's what I was meaning with connecting the dots and thinking holistically. Because if you would design a system where you say, hey, the palletizer guys think about the palletizer, and the guys who think about the ASRS, they think about the ASRS, and then the software guys do their own stuff, and the operations doesn't match up with all this stuff, then you end up in a situation where exactly these things are not possible, and then you always get open heart surgeries, which we keep doing all the time, but it's not a nice thing. So if we look into the future, that's what we want to avoid, and that's why this holistic connecting the dots thinking is so crucial, because if we consider this in the design, then exactly all this will never affect what you really need to do for your business to meet your SLAs, to meet your commitments to your end consumers or to your customers and so on.
So in that partnership, when we're working with the customers and we're understanding their operations, do you see a difference in how they're looking at their workforce, not just from like headcount replacements, but the nature of the work for their human elements within their warehouse?
I mean, I think there is obviously this headcount replacement thing when you talk about automation. I think the bigger problem today is that you don't even get the headcount to really do what you need to do. But I still see a big change in the way how this work will look like. I strongly believe that distribution centers will become value-added service centers or experience centers for end consumers. So I do believe that the operation inside the warehouse will transform from carrying boxes or moving boxes from A to B into much more value-add towards end consumers. This might be value-added services. This might be special packaging. This might be special customizing. Anything which will really add value to the end consumer. These are the jobs which are going to get more and more in the warehouses, and all the rest is going to get more and more automated.
So it's interesting if you look at, like we talked about, a grocery facility, something where you have different temperature zones. Getting headcount in the building that are willing to spend hours on end in -degree temperatures is a challenge. So how do you see automation changing the way that those people are affected? You talked about maybe redeploying them in different parts of the warehouse to value-added areas, but what happens when those roles get automated, and how are those people directly affected?
I mean, there is a part of these roles which will just be non-existent. And then the question is, what are other roles? And this can be roles like we talked about, operationally managing this stuff, looking over how is really stuff flowing the way it flows in that case. I think, but there will be a portion of headcount will just get reduced. That's the fact of it. However, I do believe that the growth which a lot of these companies are predicting cannot be even covered with the people they have today. So I think that the net calculation will not be firing people. It will be doing more with the same amount of people.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Essentially, it's taking quality of life of those workers into consideration and making sure that, well, let's automate the places that nobody wants to work anyway. Let's automate the places where it is taxing or it's hard on the human body. Let's automate those and redeploy those people into something that is value add for the company, but also quality of life improvement to the individual.
Yeah, exactly. And we are not talking about dark warehouses which are going to remove anybody in there. It might be the case in some areas, but I think most of them will still require human interaction one or the other way. And one example, I was recently walking one of our customers' warehouses, and there was a guy who actually said, hey, by this technology, it enabled me to work maybe 10 years longer. They were thinking they're going to retire in the next 1 or 2 years because the job was so heavy for them and their bodies. And now they recognize by a change of environment, the company can process much more with the same people, and these people have a longer period they can stay with this company and really do their work.
So you mentioned dark warehouses. So everyone has like this futuristic meet George Jetson kind of view on what a warehouse would be. Neither one of us has a crystal ball, but we have been in the industry quite a while. Can you tell me what you think a warehouse will look like 10, 15 years from now?
I don't think that the dark warehouse is the goal, because nobody is going to get harmed if in a warehouse you have still 20, 30, 40 people who are helping run this operation, who are doing some task in there. So I don't think that it's a goal to be chased to make a warehouse dark. I think the goal which we should chase is just how can we create a much more connected warehouse? How can we connect it to the retail stores? How can we connect it to the consumer experiences? How can we ensure that the supply chain is a connected one, that I have the right inventory and stock where it needs to be, that I also, in regards to processing orders, that it's not just about being fast, it's about being right on time. It's not just, hey, bring it tomorrow there. No, bring it tomorrow between 3 or 5, or bring it the day afterwards. So it's really this balance on how can I make this warehouse operate in a way that it can satisfy the receiving party, the store or a consumer, in the right way, and balance this continuously in a very dynamic environment. So I think that's how I see the warehouse of the future, much more than the challenge, okay, let's make it dark. Because to be fair, We have built 20 years ago warehouses where we automated everything from depalletizing to palletizing, and there are maybe some service people in there. So that's not the big gain there. I think the connected thing and the warehouse which can deal with a volatile, unpredictable environment and really provide the value to the end consumers, that's the big question.
So we could talk through, warehouse, the one that you did 10, 15 years ago, from depalletizing all the way through palletizing. But on a different note, how do you see the logical connection between an order drops, a customer hits, buy it now on a website, and how does that work from the time that I hit click to when it arrives at my door?
I mean, you mean software from an execution process, or how do I feel? From an execution process, obviously the connection needs to be that all these software systems communicate in the right way. And then the question is that it arrives there. I think everybody can make it happen. The question is how you can make it in the most effective way, from the best located warehouse to maybe combine it with another order, or maybe we combine it with additional SKUs this person might buy. How you can create all these efficiencies. And this brings me back again to this connected approach, where also maybe AI and predictive systems will play a role, where hey, people who order this kind of SKUs might order this one. So bring them together so you can gain all this efficiency. I think the execution part of it is not the issue. It's really about how you can make it most efficient so your cost per piece are really low.
Well, and not only cost per piece. If you're able to combine the order with another order, you saved on one transportation cost, but also there's a carbon impact, right? So now one truck route has to go one fewer package.
Absolutely.
So the whole thing, holistic view, I think that's very interesting to look at, the connected warehouse.
Yeah, and I think an important element to that is what I said. I don't believe that there was a period in times 5 years ago, 2 years ago, where it was just about fast. So I remember talking to a customer, and we talked about SLAs, everything which comes in by 3 needs to go out by 6. And I told them, hey, could we extend this window by another hour? 1 hour of extension would have meant $10 million of investment savings. And they said no, because we need that to be competitive, because it was part of the strategy. So these SLAs were king. The 10 million were not relevant in that case, because the fear was we might disappoint customers. The loyalty is going to be harmed, and so on. And the cost of opportunity, or the cost which we might potentially lose by doing that, are much higher than the 10 million which they need to invest to achieve that. I think there is still a portion of that today, but there is also a portion of saying it's not just about being fast, it's about being accurate on your promise. And that's where all these systems, how we allocate orders, where do we allocate them from, these predictive systems will really help us to gain more efficiency and get better accuracy in delivery times, because I think that's the future. I really think that the delivery of accuracy times is what people will want and we need to provide.
So all of that kind of takes the assumption that the partnership between the technology provider and the retailer, the 3PL, is solid. So where do you see that partnership or that relationship evolving in the next 10 years to accomplish the goals of the customer while still, achieving the goals of the provider?
What I like to say, first of all, it's going to change from partnerships on projects to partnerships on journeys. We talk a lot about automation journeys. Even this podcast is called like that. And it's because we truly believe that you need to pick somebody who will walk this journey with you. Because it's not about one project. There are continuously things popping up which you need to do, updates, new technologies, extensions, new warehouses. So you need somebody who will be there for you within the long run. And I think on a journey like in life, sometimes you sacrifice on one side, sometimes you sacrifice on the other side. But if you are to get on a journey, in the end, you both end up being successful. If you operate in your mindset on a pure project and everybody tries to defend his stakes, then it's obviously getting difficult. So I think there is a mind shift change in terms of partnerships and ecosystems matter, but it's not about projects, it's about automation journeys, because the world is going to evolve fast and you can't change your partners that fast.
So for any executive listening right now, what would be one piece of advice that you would give to them to achieve this partnership, to achieve this automation journey with the right partner?
I think time is the most valuable thing humans have in the world, but I would recommend everybody to take the time and really figure out who could be the right partner, and rather take the time choosing the partner than just launching an RFQ and getting into a bidding process where there is no real time to figure out, is this really a match? So I would really encourage somebody, even though they might not know where the first project is going to happen or if this investment is going to happen at all, take the time, even though time is money, and try to understand who is this partner and choose somebody you really want to walk the journey with.
So in that automation journey, how does a retailer, a 3PL, make sure that the solution they're investing in now, or the technology or the piece of equipment that they're investing in now, doesn't have to be completely scrapped in 10 years?
There is always a risk of mistakes. That's not right. But I would first try to figure out how has my partner dealt with mistakes and what are the innovation or correction cycles this partner has taken based on experience. And I would also focus a lot on a scenario thinking approach. I think we didn't talk about that, but one of the most significant technologies in warehouse design in the future will be digital twins in my perspective, because you don't know what the future gonna bring, but with these tools you can at least play with it, and you can go through certain scenarios and certain strategy elements, and you might not hit it accurately, but you will know, hey, if this scenario happens, then this is my plan how I would execute it. So I think I would look for somebody who wants to focus on that and then really want to go in a collaborative mode and try to apply this scenario foresight thinking and then commit on a path forward. And even if stuff goes wrong, if you have picked the right partner, they will not leave, and then you need to fix it together and take a new route.
So we've talked before in this podcast on digital twins, the difference between simulation, emulation, and digital twins. The nice part about the digital twin is it's a low investment. So you can do a low investment and then you can play out multiple scenarios. So on the network side of things, as a retailer or 3PL is building out their full network of warehouses, how do you see digital twins mitigating risk for that particular customer?
On the one side, to understand how I distribute volumes, and on the other side, it's really playing about, if we talked about SLAs and say, look, how does that look like if I have a certain growth in a certain region, if my order profiles are flexing, and my SLA is required to be, instead of today, 6 hours, they need to be 3 hours. So I can see what the impact of that is. And the impact of that might be, hey, I will ship my orders 3 days later. If this is just during peak, you might be able to afford it if your brand is strong enough. You will not lose the loyalty immediately. If you're a company who really competes in a sector where you don't differentiate necessarily just by your brand, but by the service level you do, then you will understand, look, if these scenarios happen, then I'm really in trouble in that case. So I think it will allow you to see how much money do you invest to be covered completely, how much risk you are willing to take, and play anything through which comes to your mind. In the end, this might not just be investments in automation. This might be strategy of how do I supply goods, which trucks, what size of trucks I'm going to use to really reduce carbon footprint, to reduce costs. There's so many elements to it. If you can connect it, I think each stakeholder within the company, doesn't matter if it's transportation, if it's supply chain overall, if it's the warehouse distribution automation part, they all start collaborating together and really figuring out what makes the system break, or on the other side also, what makes the system really deliver a business case which is financially viable.
But it all goes down to those KPIs. What are we trying to solve for? And it may be worth it for one customer to spend that extra $10 million because of the loyalty that they see in opportunity costs. Ultimately, it comes down to partnerships, those collaborations, and understanding one another to determine what the return on investment is. Building in a digital twin is that baby step into getting the solution, and then obviously a partnership along the automation journey.
Exactly. I mean, if anybody tells you that this kind of projects have no issues, then they have never done any. But the key is really how do you behave and how do you act if stuff goes wrong. And I think the more work and the more time you put into it upfront and talk really openly about risks, about potential scenarios which might happen and analyze them, that gives you really, really an advantage. But this means also you need to start thinking early enough about this stuff, not when you come to a point and hey, if I don't do this investment now, in a year from now, my DC is going to be broken because I can't handle the volume. I will start disappointing the customers. So rather start earlier and take the time up front. I think in the end, this will be the faster and more successful route.
And then you have the game plan. You just need to execute.
Exactly, yeah.
So to close out the podcast today, I think it'd be fun to ask some kind of spitfire questions. So I'm just going to fire away and let me know what you come back with.
Okay.
So what do you think is the most underrated technology in warehousing right now?
Software.
Thank you. Fixed automation. Do you think it's timeless or do you think it's on borrowed time? So large scale fixed automation.
Depending on the industry, in some industries, borrowed time, in some industries, it will always be there.
Can you differentiate?
I think a lot of this industry is parcel sortation and so on. I mean, there are ways how you do this more, but if your business is very predictable and you know what you need to process in a certain area, they are still economically the most viable option. You know, the other stuff offers you flexibility and so, but not every industry needs this flexibility, and that's why I feel they will be there.
But this also goes back to your connected warehouse. Just because you have fixed automation doesn't mean you also have a flexible component. Fixed automation to meet all of your baseline, your steady state, and then you can play with other technologies so long as they play nicely together.
Exactly.
If they don't play nicely, you're just introducing risk to the warehouse.
Absolutely. And that's why also I don't believe there is a silver bullet necessarily. I think it's not an either or thing. It's an and thing. And the question is, how good are you to be able to connect this?
If a warehouse could have a personality, what personality do you think the warehouse of the future has?
Consumer-centric.
I like it. I like it. What's a question a supply chain executive should be asking their warehouse automation partner that they almost never ask you?
I think they ask these questions. They ask about big failures and so on. But I feel sometimes too easy answers get accepted. I think I would really drill deep in the big mistakes the partner has made and take a look at it, how they have solved this. Because that in an unpredictable, volatile world, that there are going to be issues, there is no way around. The question is always how you deal with. So I would really focus on checking how has this partner dealt with these tricky situations.
I think that's interesting because as an industry, we're always very good at sending a reference. Hey, go talk to this customer. But we're strategic in how we choose the customers. If we were to choose a customer who had a bad experience and yet we stuck around, we made it right, we've never walked away from any problems on a warehouse floor, then that's a different story.
Absolutely. And I'm saying this now from TGW's perspective. I think we are in a very lucky position. The company we are, the structure we have, that we are foundational, that there are no reports on quarterly base to any stakeholders, no anything. I mean, we need to be successful. We need to make money, but it's profits through principle somehow. So I think we are in a lucky situation that also our company structure really allows for this midterm and long term. If you need to report quarterly earnings to stakeholders, you get always in a tricky situation. You are tied to stock prices, you are tied to this stuff. Then the question is how you're really going to behave. Even though as a human you would like to do so, the question is, does the environment allow it? And I think we are in a lucky situation where we can really say we can commit on that and we will be there. We don't walk away.
So is there a question out there, an assumption that operators or executives are making right now that could age poorly?
I think the only one which I would call out is really looking for this small islands of automation, doesn't matter if it's in hardware or in software and so on, and really making the mistake not considering a holistic perspective and trying to connect the dots from the beginning, but rather trying to make an investment here and these pilots. I mean, we were just last week at a customer and they tried a lot of these pilots for years, and in the end, if you sum up the money they have spent on them, I think there are a couple of millions going into that. They could have gone a different route down, but at the beginning they were afraid of too big investments. Too big, if it fails, it's a massive noise. So they started doing small stuff, but in the end they recognized by doing all these islands of automation, they never get a business case which is really making or meeting what they would expect. So I think big.
So I think it's interesting. So many people think the small automation pieces, that they say are modular and, hey, we can just grow with it. They think that the investment is linear and the payback is exponential. And yet, that's not the way we see it. We see it kind of toppling down. Additionally, there are some like lease for performance kind of robotics as a service. And a lot of people say, hey, I want to adopt that technology, and then peak happens. How do you see some of those risks manifesting on the warehouse floor?
No, exactly. It's stress testing this stuff. And I think simulations or digital twins will help. If you stress this stuff out and stress it business-wise, where do you get these robots in peak times? You know, how is this happening? Or can you really put that many in such a small area? And maybe there are other strategies which are much more clever and agreeing on SLAs to stretch the performance over multiple days or whatever. But you need to plan for it from the beginning. The worst thing which can happen is peak hits and then you are surprised. I think the world is giving us enough surprises. We should try to do everything to think about scenarios which could happen, and then if the surprise comes, it's not 100% surprise, it's just a 20% adjustment which we need to do.
So, Stipe, anything in closing that you have on picking the right partner and making sure that the automation journey that the executives and that the potential customers are listening to this podcast take away?
The main thing for me is don't see it as a project, see it as a journey. And ask yourself, are these the people or the company you would really take and walk the journey with?
Well, thank you, Stipe, for joining me in this episode of our podcast. It's always enjoyable when we get to look at big picture.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of our podcast. If you'd like to hear more, please like and follow, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time in our automation journey.